Hello everyone. So here is my new video which is on critical appreciation of Because I Could Not Stop for Death. This is a very well known and means creative poem by Emily Dickinson, and the points we will cover are first about the poetess, then critical appreciation, and at last conclusion. First is about the poetess. She was born on December 10, 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts, US, and died on 15th May 1886 at the age of 55 in Amherst, Massachusetts, US. By occupation, she was a poetess, and alma mater was Mount Holyoke Female Seminary. Notable works by her are like this: I test liquor never brewed, Because I could not stop for death, which we will cover today in our video. So these are the critical appreciation points. We will cover all these points one by one. First is introduction. Because I Could Not Stop for Death, Dickinson's best known poem is a depiction of one speaker's journey into the afterlife with personified death leading the way. Next is historical context. See, Because I Could Not Stop for Death was published in 1863 and believed to be written between 1855 and 1863. The Dickinson properties. These are the years in which Emily Dickinson wrote most intensely. During Dickinson's early years, she experienced the death of many people close to her, including that of her cousin. It is easy to see why she felt familiar with death. So, Dickinson actually also lived near a cemetery. So, she watched many people, even loved ones, riding in a hearse to their final resting places. This is likely inspiration for the setting of the poem. In times of sorrow, she would likely have heard sermons about salvation, paradise, and mansions waiting in eternity. So, our next slide is about summary. In the first lines of the poem, the speaker uses the famous line, Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. This phrase hints at the personification that is going to be utilized throughout the stanzas to describe the experience of entering the afterlife. Death stopped for the speaker and helped her into the carriage that held just ourselves and immortality. And they drove along the lane, and the speaker takes note of what she sees around her. She was in the process of putting away the life she knew and allowing this next stage of existence to take over. They pass a school, fields, and the setting sun. The poem concludes with the speaker saying that it has been centuries since all this occurred, and she first realized the horses' heads were pointed towards eternity. So, this is about the summary. Next, we will study in our critical appreciation is about themes. So, see about the themes. There are several important themes in Because I Could Not Stop for Death. The most obvious of these are mortality and death. What makes this poem's take on these two themes so interesting is that they are depicted from a position of immortality, means after death. The speaker is already in the afterlife when she is describing her experiences with death. This leads to another theme, immortality. And this is the part of the reason why the speaker is so calm throughout the majority of the poem. Such themes are also explored in other poems of Emily Dickinson. Next is about tone. This poem has a very distinct tone and mood. The tone, which is the voice of the speaker or poet in the poem, is calm and measured. She is aware of what is happening around her but is not overly emotional about it. This is maintained throughout the first few stanzas until the speaker gets closer to death. At this point, things start to shift a little and the tone becomes more sinister. This is seen through the words like chill and quivering. The last lines bring back the peace of the first part of the poem as the speaker matter of factly states that the horses' heads are pointed towards eternity. Next slide is about mood. The mood of the poem is emotional experience that the poet is attempting to create for the reader. It is what the reader should feel while reading and after finishing the poem. In the case of this particular poem, the tone and mood are tied together. Next is about stanzas. Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson is a six stanza poem that is divided into sets of four lines known as quatrains, as we all know. These quatrains do not follow a single rhyme scheme, although there are examples of perfect rhyme in the poem. For example, me, immortality, and civility in the first two stanzas. Next is about meter. The meter is much more consistent. It resembles a regular metrical pattern. The first and the third lines are made up of four sets of two beats or a total of eight syllables. The first of these beats is unstressed and the second is stressed. This is known as ambient tetrameter. The second and fourth lines are also use amps means or unstressed and stressed beats, but there are only three sets of two beats in each line. This is known as ambient trimeter. Next is about personification. Personification is one of the most obvious techniques at the work of this poem. It occurs when a poet imbues a non human creature or object with human characteristics. Death is very clearly personified from the first stanza. He acts as the speaker's suitor, encouraging her to get into the carriage and ride with him into the unknown. He is both kind and civil. Next is about alliteration. Alliteration occurs when the words are used in succession or at least appears close together and begin with the same sound. For example, labor and laser means L and L sound is repeating here in the second stanza, and school and stove S and S sound in the third stanza is repeating. So this is alliteration used in the poem. Next is allusion. An allusion is an expression that is meant to call something specific to the mind without directly stating it. Although it is not clearly stated in the lines of the poem, it is clear that the speaker is supposed to be in some sort of afterlife, likely the Christian concept of heaven. But the fact that is not stated explicitly allows any number of interpretation about what kind of world the speaker is living in now. Next is about enjambment. So see what is enjambment. Another important technique commonly used in poetry is enjambment. It occurs when a line is cut off before its natural stopping point. Enjambment forces a reader down to the next line and the next quickly. One has to move forward in order to comfortably resolve a phrase or sentence. For example, the transition between lines 3 and 4 of the first stanza and 2 and 3 of the second. Next is symbolism. The carriage ride is symbolic of the author's departure from life. She is in the carriage with death and immortality. Dickinson reveals her willingness to go with death when she says that she had put away labor and leisure too for his civility. This further reveals that the author has come to terms with her own mortality. She has set down all she wanted to do in life and willingly entered the carriage with death and immortality. She may be aware that had she not gone willingly, they would have taken her captive nothingness. But this does not seem to alter her perception of the two characters as kind, thought, and even gentle. So this is portrayed as death drives slowly for her, allowing her to reminiscence. He knew to haste as they drove. He takes her through the course of her life with a slow and patient ride. Immortality rides along but is silent. So this is symbolism. Next is style. But because I could not stop for death is made up of six quatrains or four line stanzas, which is known as quatrains. Like many of Dickinson's poems, this one uses a traditional meter often found in hymns and nursery rhymes called common meter. The poem's lines are arranged in amps, two syllable segments or metrical feet in which the first syllable is unstressed and the second syllable is stressed. Quatrains written in common meter have alternately 8 and 6 syllables to the line. The 8 syllable lines with 4 amps in each line are labeled iambic tetrameter. So, next is conclusion. In the conclusion, because I could not stop for death was an interesting poem written by Emily Dickinson in 1863. This poem involved a slow carriage ride throughout uplifting life to a sudden dark turn to staring death in the face. This poem used two types of figurative language, which are alliteration and personification, as we have done in our previous slides. So, thank you for now and bye to all.